Story 1. My brother was 6 years old in 1979 and watched Salem's Lot. He slept under my parents' bed for a week. He did this not to feel safe, but so the vampires would eat our parents first. Story 2. I was a very sheltered kid and had never seen a single PG-13 or higher movie in my life. I told my parents I was going to see another movie and went to see The Ring with a friend in an old theater late at night when I was 13. The undead girl in the closet scared me deeply. I ran out of the theater sobbing because I was so scared. I had nightmares for over 2 years after that and never finished the movie. I am 36 now, and that is still the most scared I have ever been. Story 3. Fire in the Sky. It is more of a drama than a horror movie, but the abduction scene haunts my nightmares to this day. Story 4. When I was 5 or 6, I had to watch it. I saw Pennywise eat off a man's arm and screamed. I cried so loudly that the neighbors thought something was terribly wrong and called emergency services. My mother had to explain the entire situation to the police, and they chuckled and left. I was traumatized for a long time, and for about a month or two, I would not go near a sewer hole on the sidewalk. Story 5. The Exorcist is no contest. When I was young, even as a horror movie fan, I had a hard time watching it into my adulthood. The closest any other movies have come so far are Hereditary, especially the scene near the end with the mother banging her head against the ceiling, and the 1990s movie Event Horizon, known for its hell scenes. Story 6. Not fiction but Dear Zachary. It deeply affected me, and I would cry on and off for 2 weeks after watching it. Story 7. Growing up, I had an adult neighbor who was allowed to watch Child's Play when he was a child. This was a grown man in his 30s at the time, who admitted that he was always nice to his children's toys when putting them away. That way, if they came to life, the toys would remember who was always good to them. Story 8. Cannibal Holocaust. I search for the most disturbing movies to watch, and this is the only one I somewhat regret seeing. It is not just disturbing, but it is done very distastefully. The cruelty scenes go on for a long time, and it is not even filmed creatively or with enjoyable direction. I have pure disgust for this film. Story 9. The Mothman Prophecies. Some really strange events there that, for reasons I do not understand, left me unsettled for weeks. Story 10. Hereditary. I just wasn't right after watching that one. I wasn't expecting that movie to be the way it is. Story 11. Final Destination. I do not like airplanes, bridges, logging trucks, and many other things because of those movies. I still love them. Story 12. Ghoulies. I never saw the film, but the trailer showed a little ghoul coming up into the toilet and feasting on a man's private parts. I was about 4 years old and couldn't sit on a toilet for months. Story 13. The Babadook is not a horror movie. It is an examination of how grief over the sudden death of a spouse disrupts the normal dynamics of a parent and child, especially if the child is neurodivergent. Nobody will ever convince me otherwise. Story 14. I'm sure this is unpopular, but I believe in paranormal activity. I was 17 and not a horror fan. My boyfriend at the time dragged me to see it in a cinema. I was terrified. Because it was all invisible, it left me scared forever. In comparison, I watched Insidious with my horror-loving husband, and I just found it hilarious because the demon or whatever was so unbelievable. Story 15. Watched it at a sleepover when I was around 6. Called my mother before they started part 2. I did not sleep over. Story 16. Okay. Flatliners. I was babysitting at age 12 and watched it on television while the children were sleeping. I turned it off after a while, but it was the most scared I have ever been of a movie. Story 17. 1964 Night of the Living Dead. Saw it when I was 8 and I do not know what it was, but that film haunted me for a while. Story 18. Candyman deeply affected me when I watched it. I saw it in theaters while very stoned, and it made me severely afraid of walls for several months. It turns out that fear of walls is an irrational obstacle since they are everywhere. My brain even started perceiving trees as narrow walls. It is such a good movie. I highly recommend it. Story 19. Pet Cemetery. The thought of bringing a dead child back to life and just creeping around terrified me. I never get scared by movies, but this one had my hands sweating. Story 20. There is one movie I couldn't even finish watching, and I still feel sick when I remember it. However, I don't remember the name. A group went to a certain canyon and met a maniac who pretended to be a friend and promised to help them with their car. The last scene I saw before deciding to ignore this movie was the maniac breaking the last survivor's spine and saying something about her just being a talking head now. Story 21. The Manitou. A small growth on the neck with a little creature growing inside troubled me for a while. Story 22. For me, as a kid, it was the original It with Tim Curry. Also, the opening scene of Darkness Falls absolutely terrified me right after I got over it. That scene still holds up as very scary. It built suspense so well. I literally rented the movie, watched that scene, turned the movie off, and experienced about a year of terror every night. I came back to it a few years later to actually watch the movie, face my fear, and see the antagonist die. Story 23. I think it was The Boogeyman 2. I was only a kid when I saw it, but there was a scene where a girl was cutting her own skin open, trying to get out all the maggots. I cannot remember if it was a hallucination or not. Story 24. To any parents reading this, do not let a fourth grader watch this or they will get nightmares. Be scared of the bathroom in the dark, stormy days, and still have a lingering wariness of Pennywise well into their teens. Story 25. I do not know the name, but it was a very violent depiction of the crucifixion of Jesus. This was before the film titled The Passion. I have issues with my wrists to this day. I cannot let anything touch my wrists because I am afraid of nails going into them. I do not like my wrists being touched. I cannot wear a watch or bracelets. My mother was very upset that my father let me watch that. I was quite young. Story 26. American Werewolf in London. I watched this when I was far too young. The transformation scene was, for the time, horrific and gave me intermittent nightmares for years. Even as an adult decades later, werewolves come to mind when walking in the woods at night. Story 27. I have two. Final Destination 1 and/or 2. I don't remember which. I can still feel my anxiety from the garbage disposal scene, which was not even a death scene per se. Also, I will not drive behind any semi-truck nor allow water bottles in the front seat of my car. My anxiety has never been so high for such a long time. Silent Hill. This was the last scary movie I saw in theaters. I was crying by the end, and there was just too much blood, guts, and gore. This movie sealed the deal that I do not like being scared. It all looks too real, and I cannot help but imagine the pain and emotions of those characters. I honestly do not think I have watched a scary movie since then. Story 28. The Butterfly Effect. I saw it at 13. My body felt very strange afterward. I was shaking internally. It definitely left an impression on me. I rewatched it years later and was fine. Story 29. Bone Tomahawk. I hate horror movies and had no idea what was coming. The audio from the killing scenes has tortured me for years. Story 30. I grew up watching The Shining and loved it. However, I didn't know my family had the made-for-TV version until I was the only one still awake at a sleepover at someone else's house. Everyone else was asleep, and I stayed up to finish it. When the bathtub scene came on, I felt like it was a personal attack on me. As far as I knew, it wasn't part of the movie. That moment still sticks in my brain as a moment of pure terror. I was 11. Story 31. Insidious. I watched it with my friends at camp. When the movie was over, I went to the bathroom, and my friend jump-scared me as I walked out. I fell on the floor, had a meltdown, and everyone was staring at me. Story 32. The Ring, the original Japanese version, is the best. What other film could even compete? Almost every home has a television screen somewhere. Even if you are not in a room with a screen now, for all you know, Sadako could be crawling out of a screen in a different room in your home at this very moment. Story 33. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. My dad fell asleep watching it one night. I have loved it ever since. I think I am damaged because I consider it a legitimately good piece of film art that most people need to see. Presaged New Hollywood in almost every way. Maybe it was part of New Hollywood. It should be if it is not. Story 34, 120 Days of Sodom. Requiem for a Dream. Speak No Evil. Hereditary. There was a time when I was really into obscure horror movies. I can't remember the name of one, and I'm glad because it was terrible. It was black and white, and the screen was blurry a lot of the time while things were happening that your imagination had to interpret. Oh my God, I had to turn it off. It looked like people playfully sawing into body parts for an uncomfortable amount of time. It was absolutely dreadful. Whoever made that wins, bar none. Antichrist, a Serbian film, Martyrs, Irreversible. I think I honestly blocked these out of my memory. Story 35, Paranormal Activity. I was living on my own with my boyfriend in our new place and still learning that environment. Plus, I was pregnant at the time. I was extra on edge over that silly movie. Story 36. I saw Alien when I was too young, and for years I would lie awake in bed at night worrying that extraterrestrial creatures were going to come from space and eat me. Lately, I watched The Outwaters and it scared me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Story 37. The original black and white Night of the Living Dead. Even as a kid, I knew it was hokey, but that ending, Jesus. It was my first time experiencing hopelessness and despair for humanity. Story 38, Mother. It was strange but manageable until they passed around the baby and tore it apart. I felt very disturbed afterward and just turned it off, sitting silently for about an hour. I eventually finished it after I processed what I had just seen. The ending did not make me feel any better. Story 39. Scariest by far was Hereditary, but I think the most psychologically disturbing one to me was Vivarium with Jesse Eisenberg. It left me with a permanent pit in my stomach. Story 40. There was a movie I saw when I was a kid. It was past midnight, which meant I should not have been watching. I was hiding. This was Brazil in the late 1990s. It was definitely an old American movie, and there was an actor or actress who was shooting a movie and died by electrocution. This happened in the movie. It was so scary and traumatizing as a child to see, and to this day I never want to rewatch it. Story 41. Not horror, but I think the movie is called Pathology. I woke up convinced my wife was trying to kill me. Story 42. Just reading the parent's guide for a Serbian film on Internet Movie Database psychologically scarred me. I haven't even seen the movie. Story 43. I think the worst of it was a Robert Zombie movie. It was not even remotely scary. It was just gross and full of gore, poorly written, and I wanted his wife off my screen. Like, fine, think your wife is attractive, but what does that have to do with this storyline? It was irritating. Story 44, The Fourth Kind. I will never watch that again. I have always believed in aliens being real. The X-Files influenced me from when I was a child, and this movie overwhelmed me. I had to sleep with the lights on for weeks. I have also been wary of owls ever since. Story 45. The Blair Witch Project had me scared of sticks, not monsters or ghosts, just sticks in the woods. Story 46. Poltergeist. Watching it as a 4-year-old did not help. Having my parents tell me the same thing was going to happen to me, being sucked into my closet if I was bad, also did not help. Yes, my parents were not great. Story 47. Not a horror movie, but Mouse Hunt with Nathan Lane traumatized me during the cockroach scene. I still can't watch it. It's all I remember. Story 48. Dear Zachary. A letter to a son about his father, give it a try, but do not spoil it for yourself. It is a documentary. Story 49. It is very recent, but I saw Bring Her Back 2 weeks ago and have not stopped thinking about it since. It might just be a matter of it pushing my specific buttons, but it had me completely shocked. Story 50. Likely because I am a parent of young children, the original Speak No Evil tore my brain apart. I still think about it uninvited at times. I wish I could unwatch it. Story 51. I remember watching You're Next, and I still think about how horrible that movie was. In the end, knowing family would do that to one another made me realize I was sheltered. I am sure something way worse is out there. Story 52. The Conjuring 2. I saw it for the first time when I was around 11, and it was the first horror movie that actually scared me. My brother and I watched it together on Netflix one Saturday night when there was nothing else to watch. Big mistake. Both of us were absolutely terrified, especially by the demon nun Valak, the main villain of the movie. To this day, I still have trouble sleeping every time I see pictures of that nun. Story 53. It is not actually a horror movie. However, after I watched Girl in a Swing in the theater, I was disturbed for about a week. Story 54. The Dutch version of The Vanishing. I saw it in the 1990s, and the ending has never stopped haunting me. Story 55. Not horror, but I watched Threads, and I am still deeply disturbed by it. I think of it and feel tremendous despair, so I have to force myself to change my mood. Story 56. Probably Tammy and the T-Rex. That part near the end where Denise Richards is doing a striptease to a brain that is hooked up to audiovisual equipment. Gah. Story 57. Before I was diagnosed with my mental illness, the movie Paranormal Activity really distressed me because I was convinced it was real in my mind. Story 58. The Exorcist. Hands down. Then Hereditary. But one scene from the original Evil Dead, when the demon girl sticks her head out of the basement. Ugh hi. Story 59. It is not really a horror movie, but the 2005 War of the Worlds had me terrified for weeks. I still do not like the image of the tripods standing on the hill at night, looking down on the crowd of people. Story 60. When The Conjuring first came out, it terrified me literally for weeks. More recent is Barbarian, an absolute mind-bending movie that somehow made me sad in the end. Story 61. I was about 12 or 13 at the time and couldn't sleep, so I went upstairs to watch some TV. I tuned to the science fiction channel and started watching The Blob, 1984. Initially, I thought, okay, this is going to be gory, but then I saw the first actual kill in the movie when David tries to phone the police. Seeing his arm reaching out as his scalp and face dissolved, and then his voice just became this. Nothing really disturbed me and honestly still does. I own the film now, and the first 3/4 or so still affect me pretty badly, but I can handle the remainder. The worst scene for me is in the movie theater projection room. Seeing that guy still conscious while his body is now super malleable and flimsy is sincerely some of the worst fate-type moments I've ever seen in a horror movie. Story 62. Paranormal Activity. I was at the age where I was gullible enough to partially believe it was real but old enough to know it was not. That, and the exorcism of Emily Rose. I am still scared to walk by dark alleys by myself. I am 33. Story 63. Poughkeepsie Tapes and August Underground. I probably thought they were actual snuff films because I watched them on a homemade burned DVD. Story 64. Nightmare on Elm Street. My older cousin showed me this movie when I was about 5. I already had hallucinations of monsters at night when trying to sleep. This made them 10 times worse. I went back to sleeping with my parents for about 2 years straight after this. Story 65. Not a whole movie, but I think about the cave collapsing scene in The Descent a lot, where you hear the rumble and see the wall of the small passageway move slightly. It is more terrifying than the monsters in that movie, in my opinion. Story 66. Strangers. Even today, when I watch someone standing under a yellow streetlight, I can feel the fear. Story 67. Tusk and Human Centipede. I watched these way too young at a sleepover, and they made me feel sick to my stomach and stuck with me for ages. I love horror, but body horror is still an iffy subgenre for me, mostly because of these movies. I swore I hadn't seen a body horror film that I considered good until I saw The Fly, which then convinced me to watch The Substance. Story 68. The Saw movies completely terrified me. I accidentally watched one as a child and was utterly afraid of being kidnapped and forced to play a game in a dirty imprisonment room. Story 69. Not so much a horror but Changeling. I was almost kidnapped once, and Changeling made me realize the what-ifs. Story 70. Funny Games, the 1990s version. But the Naomi Watts version is good too. A Serbian film. Cannibal Holocaust. Animal cruelty version. Terrifier. Story 71. Night of the Living Dead. I convinced my parents to let me go to a movie, and we snuck into this one. Big mistake. Story 72. The Unborn, 2009. I saw it when I was about 11 or 12 years old. It was an awful choice. The dog with the white mask and the old man crawling down the stairs scared me so much that I couldn't finish the movie. Story 73, not really a horror. But when I was about 6 or 7, our aunt and uncle put on Mars attacks for my older sister and me. I had nightmares for a long time after that. To this day, I still cannot watch it as it just creeps me out. Story 74, Room. My ex put it on. Less horror, more dark and disturbing. We had not reached the point in the relationship where I was comfortable enough to tell her I was my mother's rape baby when she was 13, and how we did not escape that man for 6 more years, along with all the trauma it caused us. The situation in the movie was disgustingly similar. I had to fight back multiple breakdowns. I felt like I was in hell the entire time, just reliving my own experiences and remembering how shattered my mother was. Story 75. Not really a horror movie, but there were a couple of episodes of Third Watch about a man who was kidnapping women, strapping them to a table, and slowly draining their blood over several days through an intravenous drip. I watched this when I was 10. Boulevard of Broken Dreams played during the closing credits and still affects me at 30. Story 76. Bring Her Back had me feeling very weird leaving the theater and all day running errands. Still thinking about it. Story 77. This one is dumb, but The Exorcism of Emily Rose. I watched it at 17 in theaters, and it affected me for years. Story 78. American Werewolf in London. I was about 8. When he closed the bathroom cabinet, the reflection freaked me out. Story 79. For me, it would be a toss-up between Alien, released in 1979, and The Thing, released in 1982. Arachnophobia, released in 1990, which someone else already mentioned, gets an honorable mention. Story 80. Dark Skies with the Tall Grays. I don't have children, but I have 8 parrots, and they have their own room. I usually like to poke my head in at night to make sure they are okay. The problem is that the scenes with them staring over the beds horrify me so much that I am usually in a karate stance, ready to kick a gray alien to save my parrots. Story 81. Maybe it does not count as a horror movie because there are no ghosts in it, but the Japanese movie Audition really unsettled me for a few days. I think this movie counts as a crime thriller, not horror. Story 82. Many years ago, I came home from work to find my roommate and a few of his friends watching one of those Faces of Death videos. Not a movie, but still. I quickly left the living room, but not soon enough. Terrifying images were burned into my brain forever. Blech. Story 83. Existence still messes up my mind after all these years. It is a very intense movie with a conclusion that will almost make you lose your mind. Every time I talk to someone who just goes in circles in the conversation, I think, this is a non-playable character, and I am not saying the right thing. I then try to say something else to move the game forward. Every time. Story 84. For whatever reason, as a teenager, the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose disturbed me. I left the theater. I have always been a fan of horror movies. I used to watch horror movies as a young child with my mother and oldest brother. I even enjoyed the original movie The Exorcist. However, for some reason, that movie made me very uneasy when I went to see it alone. Story 85. As a toddler, my aunt made me watch Child's Play, then told me I was not human but a doll like Chucky, which is why she tortured me. People would buy me dolls and then get upset when I destroyed them out of fear. The first time I smoked weed, I watched The Exorcist. I was about 9 years old. As an adult, it was very difficult to bother me with any type of horror except probably the movie Martyrs. To this day, I get grossed out but am rarely fazed by any type of horror. Story 86. Scanners was released in 1971. I think it came out then. I watched it in the 1990s and never watched it since. Any other movie does not bother me, but that one did. Story 87. As a teenager, the first horror movie I remember seeing was Paranormal Activity. Looking back, it had just cheap jump scares, but for someone who was unaccustomed to jump scares and did not know how to anticipate them, I was on edge the whole time. Story 88. Pet Sematary, specifically the wife's sister Zelda, absolutely terrified me as an adolescent and into adulthood. I watched Hereditary several years ago and did not know about the scene. I was very high, and it was incredibly traumatizing. Story 89, Eden Lake. The ending is so grueling, horrible, and hopeless once you realize what is probably going to happen to the main character. Unforgettable stuff. Story 90, 12 Monkeys is horrifying. Biological terrorism and plagues are horrifying. Brad Pitt was amazing in it. Story 91, 1. A Serbian film, whoever made this is disturbed. 2. Cannibal Holocaust, makes me feel sick. 3. Martyrs, French, so cruel it makes you nauseous. 4. Irreversible, rape at its worst. 5. The Human Centipede 2 and 3 went too far. 6. Tusk, same as above. 7. The Devil's Rejects, Rob Zombie goes all out. Eden Lake, very realistic. 9. Wolf Creek original. 10. Hard Candy, makes you grit your teeth. 11. Excision, just yuck. 12. American Mary, strangely disgusting. 13. Antichrist, nothing to say as I did not like it. Story 92. Poltergeist. I do not know why my family let me watch it with them. I was only about 8 or 9 years old, and it stayed with me for a long time. Story 93. Definitely Human Centipede and its sequel. I love the films very much. However, they are definitely traumatizing. Story 94. I remember finding Chucky in my grandmother's VHS library in Mexico while visiting one summer. I never even watched it. The cover art was enough for me to faint. A few years later, we returned, and my cousin loaded up the sequel, Bride of Chucky, and locked the door. I screamed my head off when I finally realized what we were watching and then fainted again. He definitely thought it was funny, but my aunt grounded him for the rest of our trip. I felt kind of bad, but at the same time, everything just felt so immediate. Story 95. I was 9 when my mother and sisters brought me to watch the movie Jaws. I hate swimming, even in pools, and I grew up surrounded by water. Story 96. Not horror per se, but the day after. My United States history teacher showed it to my class, and the parts where the nuclear bombs go off haunt me. Years later, after learning more about the effects of nuclear radiation and how it affects human health after an attack, I feel worse watching the day after or remembering it because now I have a better understanding of why the people in the town that was attacked were suffering. For example, the boy who went blind after looking at the explosion and another character losing her hair from acute radiation poisoning. Story 97. Insidious. I can never look at Darth Maul from Star Wars the same way again because of that movie. Story 98. Jaws made it hard to swim even in the pool. Nightmare on Elm Street made me really terrified to fall asleep for a week. Story 99. The Ring scared me for a bit, back when the internet and previews on television were not as common. My friend and I were not children, but we were scared. Story 100. Pet Sematary affected me deeply. Not because of the main plot line, but because of Zelda. Oh my goodness. That character still sends shivers down my spine. Story 101. I saw 13 Ghosts way too young. There was a scene with a ghost in the shower that a girl could not see, if I remember correctly. Anyhow, I did not sleep at all that night and refused to close my eyes when showering for months, even while shampooing my hair. To this day, I still feel a lot more comfortable if a video or music is playing while I am showering too. Story 102. Every time I watch a Final Destination movie, I think about the world a little differently for a while. I just finished watching the new one, which was pretty decent by the way, and I remember as a kid being scared of everything after watching those movies. Story 103. Not really a horror, but The Lovely Bones traumatized me as a kid. It was a good thing, though, since I didn't fully understand how bad it could be if I was taken. I understood stranger danger, but I didn't fully grasp what could happen to me. I had a habit of wandering away from my parents. There were a few attempted kidnappings that I narrowly avoided, thanks to my family. My parents were desperate, and safe to say I never left their side after watching that movie. Story 104. Final Destination 3. I absolutely love horror, but I do have Hispanic panic level paranoia and anxiety, where Final Destination movies are the most potent fuel. I cannot think about tanning beds. Story 105. I saw Mars Attacks when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I remember being completely frightened for a long time. After a while of sleeping in my parents' bed, they told me to just lay on the floor next to them. Story 106. The movies shown in Driver's Education in the 1970s were extremely gory. The two I saw seemed to go on forever. The scenes ranged from car accidents with mangled bodies to severed limbs and heads, to large blood puddles with random human tissue or shredded organs scattered around. It was the scared straight era and intended to encourage safe driving. It did not improve my driving but gave me nightmares for months. I still feel nauseous remembering it 50 years later. Story 107. Requiem for a Dream. The situation was terrible, it improved slightly, and then it became much worse. Story 108. The Birds. I was 8 years old when I saw it. This was before they had ratings for movies in 1963. I never wanted to see a horror movie ever again. And yes, I am old. Story 109. I was 8 years old when my parents took me to see The Exorcist. That movie affected me deeply, probably to some extent into my 20s. I couldn't step near the side of my bed for a long time at night, fearing her hand would come out and grab me. Story 110. I kid you not, but sinister was that movie. It is a horror film, but not cheap jump scares. There is a nice build-up for the demon to appear and the mystery ongoing. That movie had me sleeping with my lights on for a week or so, and I couldn't sleep without watching something beforehand. Story 111. The 1974 version of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is truly a horror masterpiece. If you are looking to do lasting damage, watch the Faces of Death series. It is the opposite of art and something you will probably wish you could unsee, but it is definitely traumatizing. Story 112. Signs. I was about 8 when I saw it in the movie theater. I got so scared I started hyperventilating and almost passed out. They had to take me out of there. After that, I was afraid to even look at the roof of any house, and any sound in the house terrified me. A couple of years later, and until this day, I have become obsessed with extraterrestrial beings. I think I developed the obsession as a coping mechanism and a way to overcome the fear. Story 113. Honestly, Get Out. It affected me for a while. The metaphors and messages felt very true to real life. I am white, by the way. Fabulous movie, but it had a strong impact on me. Story 114. Girl Next Door. Based on the true story of Sylvia Likens. It has made me want to stop watching horror movies altogether. Do not watch it. Story 115. Oh, it is the Poughkeepsie tapes. When that woman goes to itch her head, it is such a throwaway moment of horror. I will never watch it again. Story 116. Nightmare on Elm Street 5 is the only film from the franchise that I watched. While most of the sequels are not viewed highly, some say the third installment is the best. What Freddy did to Greta in that movie affected me deeply. I think Freddy having so much fun psychologically tormenting his victims made him much more sinister. Story 117. I was a child and watched the opening scene of Alien. After the eruption from the chest, my mom sent me upstairs to take my bath. I was doing the kid thing, where you curl up into a ball under the faucet and let the water run over you, when I suddenly heard heavy breathing and saw, in the reflection of the faucet, something moving. I turned and screamed. It was my mom hovering over me, having an asthma attack. I was never the same. Story 118. Played with toys on the floor in the living room while my mother was watching a thriller or drama movie. There was a scene where a child about my age was playing by the pool, dropped his rubber duck or ball in the water, tried to retrieve it, fell in, and drowned. The reverberating scream followed by his body floating on the surface disturbed me quite a bit. I remember asking what was happening, and she said that after that scene he would swim to the side, get out, and be fine. While I knew this was somewhat accurate, you still try to understand what reality really is, especially at that age. Story 119. Surprise Sinister is not being mentioned more here. It is a seriously disturbing film featuring a demonic entity, child possession, gruesome deaths, and unsettling scenes. The lawn mower scene is particularly haunting. I have never felt more disturbed after leaving a movie. Midsommar is highly disturbing as well. Story 120. I still have a bone-deep, visceral fear of Pennywise. I refuse to set foot in Maine, and he frequently appears in my nightmares. Also, I saw Final Destination 2 when I was 11. That really scared me. Story 121. My wife was out of town, so I went to see Terrifier 3 alone because she does not like gore. I had never seen any Terrifier movies before but heard this one would be gory. Well, I cried and realized that night that I have a limit for gore. Story 122. Funny games. Stupid movie still messes with me when I think about it, and I saw it over 15 years ago. Story 123. Henry. Portrait of a Serial Killer. It was the first time I saw something that was a realistic depiction of a psychopathic killer, rather than a cinematic type. I think I was 13 when I saw it. It upset me in a way that actually changed my view of the world we live in. The idea of immoral people who would kill regular people for no reason was more upsetting than characters like Freddy or Jason. Story 124. The fourth kind had me very disturbed. I stayed awake for 48 hours and I still get creeps from owls. Story 125. Martyrs. I was very disturbed and convinced my flatmate to watch it as well so we could share the horror. She was not happy. Story 126. My parents took me to see Hellraiser and Aliens when they were released for the first time. I'm here because of traumatizing horror movie recommendations that actually scare me, but I think I have been adequately inoculated and may be immune at this point. Story 127. I watched Stephen King's Pet Sematary at age 9. It disturbed me deeply. I still wince at the thought of the wife's dead body dropping from the ceiling, the little boy being buried there, all of it. 20 years later. Story 128. I watched The Grudge when I was about 10 years old, and I still cannot close my eyes for long while showering. I am in my 30s now. Story 129. 8mm is more of a thriller than a horror, but it disturbed me so much that I barely slept for 3 weeks afterward. I was truly shaken to my core. For those who don't know, Nicolas Cage plays a private investigator hired to find out if a deceased wealthy man's hidden snuff film, discovered by his wife, is real or not. I won't reveal the rest. It is absolutely terrifying to me because things like this do happen. That is what affected me the most. It is not outside the realm of reality. Story 130. Night of the Living Dead. I saw it at a drive-in theater. My sister and I sat outside the car because my brother wanted to make out with his girlfriend. Tough luck for him. That movie and the ending scared the bejesus out of 14-year-old me. Story 131. As a child, I was especially scared of the Blair Witch Project when my stepmother made me watch it all at the age of 5. She told me that the Blair Witch lived in the woods behind my father's house, which made it even harder for me to sleep there. As an adult, I found the movie Hereditary to be very frightening. If you know, you know. Story 132. I saw the movie The Descent when I was 14, and it made me afraid of the dark again for a while. To this day, I would rather do just about anything other than cave exploration. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.